Alright, up here in the Huron National Forest in northern Michigan, and it's just about getting to be dinner time. And something that I've always wanted to make up here is roast Cornish hens. I could have used a regular chicken, but I happen to have a couple of these in the freezer, so I figured why not. Hopefully they'll cook a little quicker because they're just little guys. Now I've got the Dutch oven heating up right now, and so I'm going to get these little hens ready. I've had these things thawing out for about 2 days. They're still just the tiniest little bit frozen. They're not so frozen that they don't move around, but they're a little more frozen than I would have liked, so the cooking time might be just a little bit longer. But anyway, we're not going to let that slow us down. So first thing I'm going to do is give them just a teeny little bit of olive oil. Just enough to say I did. Just a little bit. Now, rather than get salmonella all over my hands and then have to worry about touching things, I go with the rubber gloves. I never leave home without them. Next, I'm going to use my seasoning blend. Now this has a bunch of stuff in it. Paprika, seasoned salt, some herbs, some garlic, all sorts of stuff. Use whatever seasoning you like the best. This is one that I like for chicken. So I'm going to sprinkle this pretty generously on this thing. There's not a lot of salt in this mixture, just a little bit, so I don't mind coating it on there pretty good. Okay, now my Dutch oven is probably pretty heated up by now, so I'm going to move the camera over there and we're going to get these things in. Alright, let's see what we got. Now, before I start, I'm going to mention, I've probably shown you this thing before, but I've got this sitting on a Horseshoe Trivet. Now I got this thing from Cowboy Kent Rollins. If you've never seen his YouTube channel, check it out. If you like outdoor cooking, he's the guy. He's got a big personality and he's been doing it a long time. You can't go wrong. Now he created these Horseshoe Trivets for just this reason, and I couldn't find anything else like it on the market. So I contacted him and he sold me a couple. Now that's the trivet that the Dutch oven sits on. Inside I've got a roasting trivet. This is going to keep the meat just a little bit off the bottom. Before I start, I'm going to put just a little bit of oil on that thing, maybe just a little bit more. Now, the thing with a Dutch oven is you want most of your heat coming from the top. You see that? That's what I don't want. That's really hot on the bottom. That's a little too hot. So I'm going to move some of the coals away from the bottom and get more of them on top. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and close this up and we're going to let this sit. I'm going to go ahead and move some of these coals away from the bottom. And I'm going to put some fresh coals on top. Just like I did when I baked bread earlier today. If you have something that's going to be roasting or baking for a while, it's important to switch out your coals every once in a while because they're going to get cool and they're not going to be effective at heating up your Dutch oven anymore. So I'm going to let this keep going. I'm going to keep most of the heat on top and I'm going to come back and check this in probably about 20 minutes. All right, so we have the Cornish hens in the Dutch oven, and they're starting to roast. So I need something to go with my chicken. So I'm going to do some little petite potatoes. I'm going to make them nice and crispy and seasoned. And the trick to getting them just right is to boil them for about 5 minutes before you fry them. So I'm going to use my little butane stove here and get this water boiling. Not in a terrible rush because the chicken still has a little while to go, but I'm going to get this started anyhow. I'm going to boil this water and drop in some potatoes. First I'm going to cut them in half. That's it. Just cut them in half. They're real little potatoes anyway, so you don't have to do too much. I don't need a ton of these. I just need to make a couple of servings worth, really. So all I'm going to do is cut these in half. I like these little potatoes. You don't have to peel them. They cook pretty fast no matter how you make them. And they work just perfectly for these crispy golden brown potatoes that go with chicken or pork, I guess, are my favorites to have these with. They'd go fine with a steak or anything, really. Alright, so I'm going to let that water get up to boiling, and I'm going to get my herbs and stuff ready. What I've got here is a bunch of fresh thyme. I'm going to use these for my potatoes. It's pretty tedious to get all the little sprigs off of these things, but it's worth it to use fresh. So I'm going to go ahead and strip all these off and see if my water's about ready. It's been about 20 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn the lid of the Dutch oven 180 degrees. And I'm going to turn the entire Dutch oven 180 degrees. This ensures that if there's any uneven heating with these coals, everything inside will get enough time. And I'm also going to go ahead and replenish some of these coals. Mostly on top, just a little bit underneath, mostly around the edges. Alright, we'll come back in about another 20 and check it again. Alright, we got our water boiling, so I'm going to toss in these potatoes. I'll go ahead and cover this back up, and once that gets back up to boiling, I'm going to let it go for 5 minutes. I've got my deep cast iron skillet heated up in these coals. I'll go ahead and put a fair amount of oil in there, enough to make sure all the potatoes are getting in it. I need to readjust my pan a little bit so the oil's sitting a little more even in it. Well, I guess that's a little better. Okay, the oil's heated up now. Oops, I lost one. Yep, that is pretty hot. I might end up having to pull this out of the coals for a little bit if this is getting too hot. Yep. Oh, Can't even get my fingers over there. Alright, I think that's enough of that. Now, in addition to the oil, I'm going to put just a knob of butter in there. Nothing too big, just for good measure. Let that melt in, maybe a little more. Alright, now I'm going to season these while they're frying. Use some salt. Of course, some pepper. I can get close enough to this thing without burning my fingers. Oh, that is hot. And of course, my fresh thyme. I'm going to just sprinkle that in there. I'm going to put a whole bunch of it in there. Why not? Now when these cook just a couple minutes, I'm going to turn them over. They're not going to need a whole lot of time. You can see the oil's heating a little unevenly, so I am going to try to move these around a little bit. Ooh. You know, I might do this like a smart person and pull this out of the fire when I flip these. Well, some of them are already flipped. There's nothing I can do about that now. Man, that does smell good. Once you put that thyme in there, oh, it's so good. Whew, these are mostly just coals in here now, and even from back here, I feel like my face is getting a suntan. It's been a pretty good day as far as weather goes. It's been mostly sunny. The forecast was calling for about 55 degrees, but the thermometer in my truck said more like 60, 65. Right now, I don't have any concept of the temperature because I've been moving around so much today that my body temperature's up anyhow. Sitting in front of this thing, it might as well be 100 degrees outside. But I guess if I had to make an assumption, I'd say maybe it's getting to be about 60, 55 degrees now. Tomorrow they're calling for rain on and off all day, so we're gonna see how that plays out. No one likes rain when they're camping, but we're gonna deal with it. I'm prepared for any weather. And I'm gonna try to turn this pan a little bit. I know these aren't cooking quite evenly. I'm probably gonna regret putting that handle over more coals, but what are you gonna do? Well, these are getting pretty golden brown. I moved the skillet over a little bit to be over some more of the hot coals. I'm gonna go ahead and flip these over and see if I can do it without burning myself. These are looking pretty good. Oh. There we go, not bad. I'll give this skillet another shift because it looks like the oil's pooling to one side. That's not bad. I'll give those a couple more minutes and they should be good. Put a little more seasoning on this side. Alright, doing pretty good. A couple more minutes, I'll take these off and see how our chicken's doing. I checked the temperature in the chicken and it still has a little ways to go. So I think what I'm going to do is move the Horseshoe trivet out of the way and set this thing right down in some of these coals. I was thinking about putting it right in the fire pit, but I still need to scoop out some of those coals to put on the top of this Dutch oven. So I'm going to just kind of plop that right there and then add some more coals around the sides maybe. I'll give you a little peek of how the chicken looks. Oh man, it looks awesome and it smells even better. Actually, this is doing pretty good. I'm actually over temperature on this. I checked this not 20 minutes ago and it was only at about 100 degrees. But I'm checking this now and we've got 180, 185, 175. It's a little cooler right here, about 160, 192, 198. Wow. Okay, well, it's a little cooler on this side, so I'm going to turn this thing. I'm going to add one more batch of fresh coals to the lid, and about 10 more minutes. I know I might overcook just a little bit of it, but I want to make sure it's food safe, especially when I'm out here. And as tender as that seems, I don't think it's going to be a problem. So I'm going to add some coals and we'll come back in a few. While that chicken's finishing up cooking, I'm going to move on to the last step. I don't know about you, but if I'm having a chicken and potatoes dinner, nothing tops it off quite like some kind of a gravy. So I'm going to use the drippings in that Dutch oven and make me sort of a mushroom sauce. It's going to pretty much be a chicken gravy, but I'm going to finally dice up some mushrooms and add that in there as well. I don't need a ton. I don't need to make a ton, but I'm just going to sort of mince these up pretty fine because I don't want it to be a soup. I want it to be a gravy. This might be a little too much, but that's all right. I've still got plenty to work with. The thing about making a gravy like this is that you're sort of at the mercy of how much drippings you have. But I do have a little bit of a cheat. If you don't have enough fat in your pan or your Dutch oven from roasting chicken, I use these Knorr home style stock little pod things. It's basically just a little pod full of flavorful fatty chicken goodness. I'll use that with a little bit of flour, a little bit of chicken broth, and we're gonna make this up. So I'm gonna check on that chicken, and we might just be about ready to make some gravy. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and check this out. I'm hoping that the chicken's all done and ready to pull out of here. I'm gonna try to do this without getting any ashes inside. Oh man, that smells so good. I'm gonna try the little thermometer again, make sure we're looking good. 180, 188, 190, 200. Oh yeah. This is the first time I've used that roasting trivet in this thing, and I can tell that it's made a big difference. I'm gonna go ahead and put these in my tall skillet here now that I'm not using it anymore, just so I can kind of transport this back to the table. I'm going to try to do this carefully so these little guys don't fall all apart on me. Now I'm going to try to pull this roasting trivet out of here, if I can do that without burning myself. Okay. Well, I'll just put that there for now. We got some pretty good drippings in here. I think I'll still add one of those little pods, but we're in good shape to start making some gravy. The first thing I'm going to do is squeeze this chicken base pod thing right in there and let it sort of render down. Yeah, this won't make me a ton of gravy, but I think it'll make just the right amount for me. Now I'm going to go ahead and add the mushrooms so they can just sort of soften up a little bit before I go to the next step. That seems like a good amount, maybe one more. I'm sort of thinking that I need some more heat under this thing, so I think I'm going to move the pot, put a few more coals under it, and then put it back. Okay, I added some fresh coals in there. Now I'm going to go ahead, now that it's starting to bubble, I'm going to add a little bit of flour. Not a whole lot, just enough. Just enough to get myself a little bit of a paste. That's pretty good. I'm essentially making a roux. And I've just got to let this cook just a bit. And then I'll start adding in my liquid, which is my reduced sodium chicken broth. So I'll let this cook a few minutes. I think my heat was just about done in that other little area, so I went ahead and put the Dutch oven right here in the fire pit, right on the last of these hot coals. Looks like one of them found their way in. So I'm going to go ahead and start adding some of this liquid. Of course, I didn't bring a way to open this. I have some of those little tiny survival can openers in my bag, but I just need to pour some of this out. So I'm going to do it the Boy Scout not approved way. I'm just going to add a little at a time until I get the consistency I want. I'll keep stirring it. I may be pretty close to tapping out all the coals that are in here too, because this isn't even sizzling anymore once I poured the cold chicken broth in. So I'll just give it a minute. I want it to cook. Cooking is what makes the gravy work. If I'm just thinning it out, it's not going to work. I can say this smells pretty awesome. The sun's just starting to set between all these trees here. It's always one of my favorite times of day out here, when the sun peeks between all the trees and shines right into the campsite. I've been coming to this exact spot in these exact woods for at least 30 years. My father brought me and my brothers here when we were little kids and taught us about camping and wilderness survival, probably more so than the Boy Scouts ever taught. And now that I'm middle-aged and my father's kind of an old man, I bring him up here about once a year. We're actually coming up for our yearly trip in a couple of weeks. I thought I would come and do a little solo trip before that. Sometimes you just can't beat being out here by yourself. So I think I'm pretty happy with that. It's a little thick, but that's okay. It doesn't look like it's getting any thicker, which means it's about good for me. So I'm going to pull this off here and make myself a plate. That looks pretty awesome, if I do say so myself. I'll spoon a little of this sauce on those potatoes. Maybe I'll put a little on the chicken once I start cutting it up. And I'm pretty much going to promise you that I'm going to dip some of that bread in there too. Alright, let me cut into a little bit of this guy and see what it looks like. Look at that. You can't beat that. This thing is just falling apart. I don't even need this knife. That is beautiful. I'm gonna devour this little guy, and then I might devour his brother too. So I'm gonna dig in. That sauce is awesome. I didn't add any salt to it. The only salt was from that stock and the little bit in the broth and whatever seasonings came off the chicken. It's a little salty, but it sure is good. Wow. I haven't even eaten the chicken yet, and I can say the potatoes with this sauce is the best thing I've had so far up here. The chicken comes in pretty high up there too. Wow. Okay, well, I'm not going to keep this on and make you listen to me chew, but I hope you liked the video. I really enjoyed making this. There's a lot of steps, but if you want to eat gourmet off-grid, this is the way to do it. Thanks for watching, and until next time, this is Great Lakes Prepping.